Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park. Programs are produced independently by members of the community. The City of Highland Park is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of the City of Highland Park.
Hi, welcome to another edition of What's This Show For? FOR, Friends of Ron. I'm your host, Ron Levitsky. One of my favorite quotes is from the anthropologist Margaret Mead, who wrote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Well, we talk a lot about that, but it's interesting and heartwarming to know that within our own community, there are people who take it upon themselves to, in their own small way, help change the world. And one of them is with me today, Phil Bedeker, who's a resident of Deerfield, but is associated very much with activities going on in Highland Park as well. Phil, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
You know, when you and I talked earlier, and I learned about your resume, we could probably do 5 different shows based on different areas of your life. But today we're going to talk about the wonderful work that you and other volunteers, including your wife, has done for a group of children in Mexico.
Thank you.
Let's talk just real briefly, though, about yourself. So tell me a little bit about where you were born and where you grew up.
Well, I was born in New York, moved to Detroit when I was 2, and my father relocated in Deerfield in 1955. And I've lived in Deerfield since. I attended the Deerfield Grammar School, which is no longer. I graduated from Highland Park High School in 1960 because Deerfield High School was not yet open. I went to Lincoln College, and in 1964 I joined the Skokie Police Department. In '68 I joined the Cook County Sheriff's Police Department, where I worked North Homicide for 10 years. Worked on the bomb squad, and retired in 1988. In '88, I went to work for a hazardous waste company out of Detroit. I worked with that company until 4 years ago, when that company was purchased by a larger company, and I retired.
Wow, like I said, probably another 3 or 4 shows we could talk about, especially as a police officer. It sounds really interesting. But what struck me about your story regarding this group of children is, you know, the role that chance plays. You're walking down a beach, and so tell us a little bit. First of all, if we were to define Corazon de Niña, how would it be defined?
Well, Corazon de Niña, I consider it an orphanage for abused, abandoned, and human trafficked kids. Actually, I suppose it would be a shelter, because most, if not all, of these kids have either been abandoned by their families or they've been taken away from their families by the authorities. And this is where they are now living. The administration that runs the facility is private. I'll tell you a little bit about how that started later, but it's now basically a family of 60 kids run by Melissa and Juan, who are husband and wife, and they have basically 60 children. They take care of these children just like they're their own. It's a loving, caring, safe environment that most of these kids have never experienced. So it's more of a shelter than an orphanage.
And I take it that it sounds to me that the kids are there long term.
Some are, some aren't. Some will come in from an instance would be where one woman was single. She realized she was dying of cancer. She didn't have anybody to take care of her child. So she brought her to Corazon. They admitted her. Now, she's living at Corazon, but if a family member came forward, an aunt, an uncle, or somebody else, she would have the option to live with them, or she could stay at Corazon.
Okay, and of course, we're talking about words that are Spanish, so one would infer that this place is somewhere where they speak Spanish. So tell us where this is located.
Well, Corazon de Niña, which in English is Heart of the Girl, is located in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
And a lot of people in this general community know it as a vacation resort area on the Pacific side?
It's on the Pacific side, and we became involved in Corazon because of our interest in Puerto Vallarta. We found out that Highland Park is a sister city to Puerto Vallarta. So we joined the Highland Park Sister Cities Foundation, and through the Highland Park Sister Cities Foundation, we learned of Corazon. And in 1912, after a visit to Corazon...
1912?
Long time ago.
We're not that old.
Long time ago. 2012, we visited Corazon and became very involved after seeing the kids and seeing the conditions that they came from and seeing what was being done for these kids.
And I understand that you and your wife would go down there independently and bring little gifts for the kids on the beach?
We started going to Puerto Vallarta in 1990, and I noticed a woman that was kind of bartering for trinkets on the beach with some items, and I asked the woman that we were with, I said, what's she doing? And she says, well, a lot of people bring items from America down, and they barter with the vendors and trade. So, and she told me that they really like T-shirts with American writing on it. So the following year, I took maybe 20, 25 T-shirts down, and I figured I'm going to try it. So I was sitting on the beach, and a woman came by, and I bartered for something for a T-shirt, and I don't remember what it was. And about 20 minutes later, I looked up on the Malecon, which is like the boardwalk along the beach, and I see this 10 or 11-year-old boy walking down, and he's got a raggedy shirt on that's torn and it's dirty, and I'm looking at him, and I look down, and I see a new shirt, and I go, Chico, come here. So he looks at me and finally comes over, and I just pull his shirt out. I go, here, it's for you. And his eyes light up, and he smiles, and oh, for me, and he, gracias, gracias, and he takes off. So I go, that's kind of fun. And about 15 minutes later, here he's back, but he's got two of his buddies, and they got ripped shirts, and they're all dirty. And I go, why not? So I give these two kids some shirts, and they're, oh, gracias, senor, gracias, and off they go. And I go, hey, this is an awful lot more fun than bartering. So the next year, I took one suitcase down, and I've morphed that into the point now that last year I got 16 suitcases down.
Wow.
With I don't know, probably 600-700 pounds of shirts, and we give them away. We're there for 4 months. We give shirts away to the vendors and to the kids, and we even go up to one village and for one day, and all the kids from the village come down, and we'll give away 150
Wonderful.
shirts.
Well, I know that you became quite attached to the kids, and the audience is probably curious about them. So let's take a look at just a few slides to see some of the kids that you interacted with a number of years ago. So we can get the first one up, please. See if it comes up. Here we are. There's your wife, Trudy?
It's my wife, Trudy. The girl on the left and the girl with the pink and then the green and the orange were people that we had known or girls that we had known on the beach for several years. The girl on the left, her father was a volunteer at the church that my wife goes to, and she'd known him and the family and the girl's brother for about 3 years. And we went down there in 2012, and Trudy went to church and wanted to know where Samuel and Dahlia and little Joseph were. And they said, well, he's in jail for assaulting his daughter. And she got all upset, and she said, well, where are the kids? Well, they're in an orphanage. And it just so happened that the next day, we went to a Sister Cities breakfast with a couple of the residents of Highland Park Sister Cities and ourselves and the Puerto Vallarta Sister Cities. And the Bert Schmerich from Highland Park Sister Cities had become involved in Corazon the year before when it had just started.
While you're talking, can we get up the next slide, please?
And
yeah, go ahead.
And he had gone to the orphanage and taken pictures. And my wife was looking at the pictures and goes, "That's Dahlia. I got to go see Dahlia." So we go up to the orphanage a couple of days later. We walk in the door, and the 3 other little girls that I'd known since one of them could just walk were in there. And I turned to Melissa, who runs the facility, and I said, "What are they doing here?" And she said, "Well, they were just brought in because the middle daughter had said that the father was sleeping with the older daughter, and she was afraid that he was going to do something to her."
Let's see the next one, please, while Phil's talking.
And so the little girl came over, put her arms up to me, and I was hooked immediately.
Okay.
And again, this is Dahlia and my wife, and this is on the beach when we first met her.
So kids of, looks like from infants to maybe teenagers?
Yeah. Now these are the other 3 girls that were in the first picture, and the little baby in the middle. This is 2 or 3 years before they were in the facility. She was the one that came walking up to me with her arms outreached.
Okay, and by the time you sort of were introduced to this, the Highland Park, the city of Highland Park, and also the Highland Park Rotary had already been helping?
The Highland Park Rotary with Bert Schmerich.
We can go back to us now, please.
The Highland Park Rotary with Bert Schmerich went back to them, and Highland Park Sister Cities donated, I believe, $2,000 to Corazon de Nina, and Bert was able to get Highland Park Rotary to donate another $10,000.
Wow.
So with that $12,000, they were able to do the initial construction for a girls' dormitory, where there was two rooms that mirrored each other with washrooms, showers, toilets, etc. So all the girls had a place to sleep.
Let's look at that next slide, if we may. Again, these are some of the kids. Now, is that
what the kids would do in order to basically live? Melissa and Juan would take the kids, and they would go to different restaurants, and the kids would sing for the customers. The restaurants would feed the kids. The patrons in the restaurant became more familiar with Corazon. They made donations, and they slowly but surely started to become viable.
next slide, please. Also, it's a wonderful way of fundraising, but also getting the community involved.
Correct. And here again are the three little sisters. This is probably 2 or 3 weeks after they went into the facility.
Next slide, please.
Here is the construction that's just starting on the facility as they continue to improve. They tore this wall down and then made a second floor, which has gone to a third floor, which has gone to a roof that has a garden and a variety of other items on top. But the back portion, the gray area, is the area that Highland Park Sister Cities
Okay,
funded.
let's go now, maybe back up a step and talk about the story. The quote I start out with refers certainly to you and your wife as being concerned, but also this remarkable young woman named Melissa. Right?
Melissa.
Let's see her picture while...
Melissa is the force behind this.
Let's see her picture while Phil gives us some input. There she is with her husband. Right?
This is Melissa and Juan. Melissa came from Canada. She came to Puerto Vallarta to sell real estate. And she lived down the street from another orphanage. She saw some abuse one day and talked to someone about what to do, and somebody said, why don't you go to the orphanage down the street and see if they can give you some advice. Well, she went down the street to this facility and knocked on a door, and the door opened, and she said she saw just a swarm of girls. There was 13 girls that were standing behind her, just with their arms reaching out. She immediately was taken by her heart and started to volunteer at this facility. She volunteered for a little while, and there was a generous benefactor that would come in once a week to the facility, and he would give them $100, $200 worth of food. And this was a state-run facility. One day the benefactor came back in and went to the refrigerator for something and saw that it was empty. He in turn went to somebody that worked there and found out that he would fill the refrigerator, let's say on a Tuesday, and on a Wednesday or Tuesday afternoon, the administrator would take half or three-quarters of the food home to her family and relatives. Well, he went ballistic and called DIF, which is the regulatory agency for the state-run orphanage, and they started an investigation in which the administrator was arrested and jailed. And they, in turn, said they're going to close the facility down. In the closure, they brought in each one of the girls, and they told them that we're closing the facility and that we're going to be sending you to one of, and they gave them 4 or 5 choices of orphanages. And all of the girls pulled Melissa's business card out, because now Melissa had been there for a while and she'd made friends with the kids. She was teaching them English. And they all said, we want to go where she's going. And the regulators, not knowing who Melissa was, now wonder, why do all these kids have Melissa's card? So they call Melissa in to question her, and she explains what she was doing, and they said, well, all of these kids want to come live with you. Melissa's taken back. She goes home to her mother, who had a small home with a yoga studio in the front that they'd purchased a year or so earlier, and tells her mother her dilemma. And she says, Mom, I want to start an orphanage. And her mother says, follow your heart, Corazon. And Corazon de Nina was developed. She went back to the regulators and said, okay. And she went to her boyfriend first, Juan, says, hey, here's what I'm doing. You're either in or you're out. And he says, I'm in. So they're now husband and wife. And they went back to the regulators, and they said, okay, we'll help you get started. And 2 or 3 weeks later, she had an orphanage.
Now, you had pointed out to me when we talked earlier that the orphanage or the shelter is private, so
Correct.
It does not get any government funds.
It's a privately funded facility. She asked the government initially, she said, well, will you help us? You know, I don't have the means to do this. And the government says, sure, we'll help you. They helped her to the extent of 11 or 12 bunk beds and mattresses, and that was the extent. And that was one of the reasons that she started going to restaurants, singing. You know, she went through all of her funds. At one time I was talking to her, they had to sell the air conditioning units in the windows of the house just to get money to buy food for the kids.
I know it's come a long way. We're going to get to that, but also might strike people who are watching this that it's called Heart of the Girl, but there are a lot of boys.
There's boys there also. A couple of years after Melissa started the orphanage, she realized that a lot of the girls that were there had siblings in other facilities around Mexico, and it was her idea that it was much better off mentally for both the boy and the girl to try to keep the siblings together. So with that thought in mind, they started a boys' facility right next door, and the idea was to try to reunite the family unit. So now although there are a lot of girls that don't have brothers or sisters, and there's boys that don't have brothers or sisters there are a lot of siblings that are reunited so that they're together.
We have up on the screen both the organization's website and your email, Phil. If people have any questions, they can
Okay.
jot that down and send it along while we talk. We're going to see some more pictures in a moment, but let me just ask you a few questions. How these kids get health care?
Healthcare is through volunteers that Melissa has developed in her trip. She has a board of directors. It's an incorporated charity in Mexico, and on the board of directors, there's retired physicians. There's a dentist. The Deerfield Lions Club sends down $1,000 a year for eye care. And medical expenses, unlike the United States, are much, much cheaper in Mexico. So what would cost you $10,000 up here, it might cost you $500 down there.
Okay.
So the medical expenses are down. And again, she has some generous donors. If there's a child that really needs something, she can reach out to her network and generally get some funding.
Okay, and what about schooling?
Schooling was a problem initially because the kids would go to public schools and they were shunned because they didn't have a family. Mexican is a family unit in Mexico, and these kids were on their own. And there was a lot of fighting. They tried public schools, they've tried private schools, and just 2 years ago now, again through benefactors, they've started their own Montessori school. So they have their own in-house Montessori school for kids all the way up to primary school, which is basically up to high school. It is run inside of the facility.
Volunteers?
They're volunteers. Well, actually, they're not volunteers. They're teachers, but they're paid by another company or another foundation out of the United States that covers the cost of the teachers. Last year there were 2. The school has expanded a little bit. This year there's going to be 5 teachers.
And I was interested in something that you find interesting, and that is when kids kind of matriculate and they're kind of getting ready for college, this idea of transitional housing.
Well, we're in the process now, and I've taken this on, to try to build a unit of transitional housing. And this would be for the older residents that are transitioning into college or that are transitioning out of the facility, where they go from living with a lot of little kids to where they move into a dorm-style building to the rear of Corazon. It'll have 8 rooms. It'll house 16 residents. They'll be required to pay a little stipend. They'll be required to do work at Corazon, but these are kids that would be going to college that are transitioning into the workforce. So they get a transitional period where they learn how to do a checkbook, and they learn the basic functions that most kids that leave orphanages have to learn on their own.
You know, it seems like it could be a model for other cities. Have you heard of any?
I've heard of something like this in the States, but I think it's unheard of in Mexico.
Okay.
I mean, Melissa is so progressive that 5 or so years ago she invested in solar panels. And since it's a private facility, she was charged full price for electrical power, and they use a lot of electricity, where municipal orphanages are charged half of that. Well, she invested in solar panels, and her electrical bill went from somewhere around 20,000 pesos a month down to 1,000 pesos a month.
My. Great.
So, and you know, she was saying, well, we've got 315 days of sun in Puerto Vallarta. Why not harness the energy?
Great. Let's take a look at a few of the pictures as our show is winding down. It's just gone so quickly, but maybe Phil, you could just take a few seconds for each one and let us.
This would be Corazon after the initial demolition of the first part of the building. This is the new Corazon. The lower area is now schoolrooms, and the upper area is administration, and to the rear is the girls' dormitory.
Okay, next one.
Now, several years ago, Melissa wanted to become more self-sufficient, and we were able to raise enough money that they could start their own small business in Corazon. And what this is a small tortilleria where they make their own tortillas. They make enough tortillas there to feed the entire facility, and they also have customers that they sell tortillas to in the community.
Okay, let's skip the next one because that's a repeat sort of this, and go on to the next slide, please. If we could skip the next one and go to the next one after that.
This was the kids coming home from school. They have a van and a pickup truck, and I think I counted there's 28 kids coming home from school. And this is when the school was not in the facility, but this is a basic way that they transport the children. If they're going to an outing, everybody gets into the van and the pickup, and off they go.
Next, I think we're going to see something you just talked about. It's great to have a visual of it, though.
Here's just one section of the solar panels, and this is located on top of the boys' dormitory.
Okay, and next. And this picture I really like, especially because it goes against, the stereotypes of orphanages and shelters and so forth.
This is the girls' dorm, and this is how they decorate it. You can go in there one day and the beds will be in one direction. You go in there 4 days later and it'll be made up a different way. The kids have to make their bed. They have cubbies for their own equipment, and basically the girls share clothes. But it's a cheery, happy, fun place to visit. We've had people come in and leave and say this was the best part of their trip to Puerto Vallarta.
I bet. Let's look at one more slide as we finish up. The next one, please.
This is Corazon as it is today. You can see on the third floor they've got that covered. They have workshops up top. They have a little kiln for crafts. You can see at the far end of the building is more of a brown. There's palm trees that are covering it. That's the boys' dorm. The whole building is separated by one big black wall, and that's the boys' dorm in the brown, and the girls' dorm on this side with the administration and the administrative offices.
Okay, let's come back to us then as we wind down. I also understand that Corazon runs a thrift shop?
They have a thrift shop in the marina. They take in a variety of items that somebody remodels a house. There's a lot of rich American and Canadians that have condominiums down there, and if they remodel their dwellings, they go to get rid of that material, or the old beds, sofas, chairs, dishes, whatever. The thrift shop will take that. They take clothing. Some of the clothing that I take down, if it's rather extravagant, I'll take it to the thrift shop and they'll put it on and they'll sell it.
Okay. So as we look to the future, I mean, you've painted a really heartwarming and inspiring picture of this organization. What's the future look like?
It's going to be interesting. Right now we have 60 kids that are at Corazon. 10 of them are in college. There's a dentist, there's an architect, there's a social worker, and the social worker wants to come back to Corazon and run it.
Okay, well, we're going to have you back to get to part 2. Phil Bedeker, thank you so much for inspiring us with this wonderful story. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on What's This Show For, FOR, Friends of Ron. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.